Well, hello. I'm going to make a video today on how to change the front brake rotor on a Jaguar XJS. The main reason for this is I can't find anybody that's put one up before, and I'm sure they're out there. I did do the other side yesterday and sort of watched a video on somebody who had done one on a Jaguar XJS, I think it was, and it looked different. Anyway, I'm going to show you what I do, and you can either follow this advice or take some notes, and if you think I'm doing it wrong, by all means let me know. Okay, so what I'm going to do differently to the video I watched on the XJ6, I'm going to take the brake caliper completely off. Two reasons. It's just going to make it easier when you go to put it all back together, just trust me on that. Plus, behind here there's a bolt that holds the bracket on, that holds the brake line on. And of course Jaguar, in their infinite wisdom, put it in a position where you can't do it without basically removing the shock absorber. I still don't know how the British won the war after having this car, but anyway. Yeah, so you need to undo the brake line. There are two 19mm bolts in the back of the brake caliper that hold it on. And once that's off, that comes off pretty easily. Also, in the other videos I've seen, these bolts are bolted through from the back. You need a 16mm socket to get to them. The other videos showed pulling the bolts right out. I don't really understand why you have to take them right out initially. I would just loosen them while they're on the car and do that while you've still got the brake caliper on, so you can undo them. Somebody put their foot on the brake, you can undo the nuts and just loosen them, so when you do get the whole thing off, you can get them undone fairly easily on the ground. The other thing I'm going to do as well is I'm going to disconnect this, and the reason for that is it just makes it so much easier to move things around when you're trying to put it all back together. I had a hell of a time yesterday trying to get it all to line up yesterday until I took that off, and it will be 10 times easier to take it off while it's still all connected nice and solid.
Those bolts that I said to loosen, you can access them through the back of this shield on the back of the brake rotor. You just spin it around, somebody hold their foot on the brake, you'll loosen it and turn around. There's 5 of them all together.
If you don't know how to get these out, I've already got this out, so this will come out a lot easier. The temptation to hit the top of it is enormous, but please don't do that because that can damage things. You just give it a gentle tap on the side of it, and they do fall out. I mean, I've had that out before, so that came out very easy. Then I've seen people put the nut back on and belt the crap out of the top of it, which is really not the thing to do. And then all this moves around really nicely, so you can get to things and undo bolts really easily. Like, for the sake of taking one nut off and you know, not having to have the other wheel off the ground, not having to continuously turn the steering wheel, it made life a lot easier, I think. Alright, I've disconnected the brake line. I've taken these 2 bolts out of the caliper, and I've actually plugged off the brake line with another brake line I had in a bolt. Otherwise you end up with brake fluid everywhere and the master cylinder runs out, and that's a real pain. Hopefully this caliper will just slide off now. And it does. Nice. Alright, next thing, I've already loosened all these bolts off from the back. So next thing I'm going to do is take this little grease cover off. Dull. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is pull this split pin out. When I was doing this yesterday, I saw this thing and I thought, what a silly looking nut that is, but it's actually a good idea. It's one of the very few things on the Jag I've seen that I actually don't mind. It locks the split pin into the right spot without having to over tighten the wheel bearing. Next thing you're going to do is take this nut off, and this is not very tight. The one yesterday was actually finger tight. That was almost finger tight. Take that off. And this is what's called an encapsulated brake rotor. Why anybody would use this, I don't know, but you pop that out, and the wheel bearing will, part of the wheel bearing will pop out with it. And I'll try and keep that together. And this is what we did different to yesterday. Yesterday I undid all of those bolts, and this is all loose, and I had trouble getting it off. But that just comes off, so I don't understand why
they needed to take all of those bolts out while it was on the car, because that just come off, I mean seriously, that come off like 10 times easier than it did yesterday. Well, yesterday I pulled these bolts out on the car, but they will come out nice and easy now that I've already undone them. You just take them out one at a time, and we'll clean all those up, and this is so much easier than it was yesterday. Take them out on the ground, really easy. Now yesterday that came apart on the car. I just had to give it a slight tap with a hammer to just break all the crap off inside, but that came off, and I can't see any reason why you need to do that on the car. These are the bolts that came out of that encapsulation part that held the rotor on. I'm a little bit OCD when it comes to these things. I like to clean the threads up, so I use something like this. Gets them all nice and clean, so when you put them back together, they go in easy and you don't think you're cross-threading. Alright, you've got to clean all the grease off this shaft, which I've done, and give it a good liberal coating of grease again. And I also have re-greased the bearings inside of the wheel hub there. Alright, so we've got our new brake rotor. I'm just going to sit it on there like that and get these bolts, and I always like to put a bit of this anti-seize on it before we put them back in. You don't need a lot. You see people slap it on like it's toothpaste, put them in, and I don't know what brand this anti-seize is, but I've had it since the 1980s, and because it's from the 1980s, it's probably carcinogenic. It probably destroys the ozone layer, probably causes global warming, and it used to say on the side here, for every time you use this, 2 polar bears die. Now I've put all these back on. I've just tightened them up as best I can on the ground here. I will, when we put the thing back on and it's almost finished, I will check them properly with it on the car so we can put our foot back on the brake and make sure they're tight. I don't think they need to be overly tight. There is a proper torque setting for them in the book. I think it's 40 pounds, but you can look that up yourself. So this all, yesterday this just slid straight back on. And it has done again today. Pop the wheel bearing back in. That little washer thing only goes in one way. There's a little half moon on it. Put that back on. And I'm no wheel bearing expert, but I know you don't do these up too tight, otherwise it fouls everything up. Still spins nice and happily, because that was actually almost finger tight when I pulled that out. And you put that back on, you get it in a spot where it lines up with the hole, if you can. Must have been a way that was done before. There we go. And we will replace that split pin. Don't use the old split pin. Alright, we put the split pin back in. That's the way it came out. It's bent back around that little retaining aluminium thing or metal thing that holds the, or stops the nut coming off. So I put it back the same way. Alright, it's all back together. The brake line's on. The caliper's back, and I've put the brake pads back, and I put the old pads back in because my new ones aren't here. It turns out I think we've got a seized piston in there too, so the whole thing's going to have to come off again and go to a guy that's going to fix it up. Anyway, but that was probably 10 times easier than what I did yesterday. We've got to put the steering arm back on when I tighten those bolts up. So we've got to bleed the brakes so the calipers, all the pistons will work properly, so we can tighten those bolts up from the back, put it back together, and it should be good. Okay, it's all back together, and unfortunately it does have a seized piston in the caliper, which is annoying, but this is a 33-year-old car, 34-year-old car, so you gotta have a love for these things. Today this has taken me probably just over an hour to do this, not including all the time I've sort of mucked around with the video. That probably doesn't sound too bad, but anyway, I'll show you something else. We have 2 cheap car challenge race cars we run. They're both Hyundais, and these have different sorts of brake rotors. They're called a floating brake rotor.
And one day I'll do a video on how to change them, and it's pretty easy. And I'm no mechanic. I can change all the brake rotors on this particular car, which is a 2001 Elantra that we race, in about an hour by myself. So that's the difference between what we've got here and what the British used to do 35 years ago. One more thing on brake rotors. I bought these brake rotors because they look cool. They've got these little dimple things here, which really don't do anything. And these slots, that's called a slotted rotor. Some of them are cross-drilled, they drill holes through them, which really don't do anything in my opinion. These slots are good because we run slotted rotors on our race cars that we showed you before, and the idea of that is any of the brake dust and crap that gets stuck on these rotors gets flicked out on a road car that doesn't get driven very hard, and this car doesn't get driven very hard, I can tell you. They're pretty pointless. So if you want to save yourself some dough, don't buy all these flash ones. These are about $50 more, these brake rotors, and really only because they look cool. And cool factors a lot of things, I suppose, with cars. Anyway, I hope this has helped you, because if I had known yesterday what I was doing, it would have probably taken me about the same amount of time. Like yesterday, it took about 4 hours to do this with a lot of swearing and hitting things. But some of these simple little things, like just take things off, it just makes your life a lot easier. When I get the new calipers, or when I get the calipers done up, and I'll get some new brake pads, I'll show you how to change the brake pads on these. These are pretty easy to change the brake pads on. There's just a little bit of a sequence involved in doing it. Okay, thanks for watching.